Welcome to the Workforce Resources for Libraries video series. This is brought to you by Project Compass, a partnership of WebJunction and the State Library of North Carolina, and made possible by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This is the first in a series of short presentations by Pat Wagner, educator, trainer, writer, and consultant with Pattern Research. Pat has worked for and with libraries of all kinds, plus library boards, foundations, friends groups, and national, state, and regional library organizations. We are very fortunate to have Pat's expertise.
Thank you very much. What we're going to be talking about today is the kind of job hunters who might be coming to your library. It's very easy when we look at statistics about job hunters to think that everybody needs the same thing. Obviously, they're looking for a job. But where they are in their job hunt and what kinds of things they're looking for, plus their intention in job hunting, might be very different. So the 5 types of folks that we're going to be discussing over the next few minutes are the first-timer, the explorer, the statistic, the dinosaur, and the entrepreneur. We always have first-timers coming into the library looking for work, and these are the people who are starting on their first job hunt. Perhaps they're a stay-at-home mom or dad who is going for their first time after school to be able to look for a job. They might be people who've been serving in the military, and obviously they might be fresh out of high school or technical skill. Now, let's talk about the pluses and minuses, what they need, and what the library can do for them. Basically, they need experience and they need mentoring. They need to find opportunities to build their resume because unless they have very specific technical skills that they learned, they're not going to be able to find the best job right at the beginning of their job hunt. The nice thing about working with them is that they really have a lot of energy. They'll take suggestions, they'll try new things. I know in my own case, mentoring people who are fresh out of high school or college is a lot of fun because their eyes are open to all kinds of possibilities. The negatives aren't very good, and particularly in the market we have in the United States today. First of all, they might be totally unrealistic about what a job entails. Sometimes school doesn't do the best job of preparing people for the cliched real world. So part of what they need is people who can help them with information. The second thing is that they may be in the part of the country that for what they're looking for, there really isn't a market. And so 2 things that you can help them with is, first of all, finding what resources they need to look out of town. Because wherever you are in the country, the grass might actually be greener on the other side of the fence. And the second thing is to be able to bring in people with a lot of experience in lots of different areas and create these group coaching sessions so people can ask lots of questions and the people who are the experienced employees can kind of give a reality check to the new timers. Now, perhaps my favorite kind of person to work with is the person I call the explorer. They're the person who's proactive. They've looked at the job market, and even today they know that they want to grow, do something different. They're exploring new opportunities. And I find them a delight to work with because they don't have that edge of desperation. They're not frightened. They don't have to pay the mortgage next week. They have a job. And in a way, they're in an ideal place to look for work. In fact, I've read stories about the fact that some employers won't even look at someone's resume unless they're already employed, which is difficult, obviously, for a lot of people. What do they need? Lots and lots of connections. They're really trying to look at new ideas, find opportunities, not just in their hometown, but in other places, and they're exploring new careers as well. So even though they're not desperate, the minus for you is that they can border even on being a little bit of a dilettante. They can be very unfocused and want 100 new resources all the time. So they're somebody who can be a time drain if you have a limited budget or if you're short-staffed. They need those current listings, and so they're going to look very specifically at listings both locally and nationally and even internationally and spend a lot of time online. Something else they like are actual programs, events, dinners, mixers, all the kind of business and workplace-oriented networking events where people wear name tags and go up and talk to strangers. So they also need to be able to talk to new people as well. So even though the Explorer is really fun, The person who's probably coming into your library for the very first time is the person who has been fired, laid off, who's shown up at work and the front door is boarded up, who may or may not have the skill set they need to find a new job. You know, I know people who've worked at the same company for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, learned a certain way of doing things, a certain kind of software, and then when they came into the marketplace, they found out they had problems. We're going to talk about that dinosaur in a few minutes. But the statistic is somebody who tends to be the most frightened. And I call them the statistic because they're the people we're talking about the most, the ones that need to have professional support and they've maybe never asked for help before. They might need help with finances, with budgeting. They might need help in terms of looking at what their mortgage is doing, in addition to all the kinds of training that they need. So this is the group that probably needs the most social service support and the ones who really need that connection with agencies and organizations. And that's where you might bring somebody in who, in effect, sets up their headquarters at your library to be able to talk to people one-on-one about the things they need. I've referred to the dinosaur before, and again, this idea that I've worked for a long time, and now I don't have any of the job skills I need to do something different. Now, typically, we see these kinds of people in the proverbial Rust Belt, where that they worked in areas like manufacturing. But what if they spent 20 years working a software program that's no longer in use by most people? What if their skill set doesn't match the new job? I remember a few years ago, I was working for a library in a prestigious Ivy League college, and somebody had applied for a job as their head of reference. And one of the people in the search committee said, this woman would have been a great choice 20 years ago. She doesn't understand Library 2.0. She's not had very much experience with social media. She can't program. She doesn't know about podcasting. And so wherever this person was as a librarian before, really she didn't have the skill set for sort of the new regime. These kinds of folks are great to work with because they're experienced and they really do have that good work record and they're people who want to work. On the other hand, they can be kind of defensive. On one hand, they feel kind of entitled because of all their experience. On the other hand, they feel very angry that people just don't accept them at face value. But I have a great track record. Why aren't you just hiring me? They need professional services, and they'll be probably the most resistant of any of the people we've talked about because it's going to really hurt them to have that loss of status since their experience doesn't really mean as much as it might have meant. Also, it's hard for them sometimes to accept direction from someone who's younger than them and maybe less experienced but has more knowledge in the area they need. Usually they can get by if they have very specific kind of technical training. It might be as simple as them learning some things about computers or learning a new vocabulary or learning a new skill set. What I tell people to watch out for is not to think that training is a panacea, that it needs to be tied to specific expectations of specific employers before the training is launched. There are horror stories out there of people going through expensive training that took months and even a year for technical skills that nobody wanted. So whatever's done needs to be tied to a real employer, someone who really knows what the current market needs. Finally, we have the entrepreneur. And this is very close to my heart because this is what I do for a living. And this is the person who's been laid off, fired, new to the workplace. They're not interested in looking for a job. They want to start their own business. They want to be the person in charge. And what they need to understand, unless they've grown up in a family where they've seen firsthand how businesses operate, is how the market operates. And the market is not about money. The market is where we exchange goods and values with each other and finding out who's going to pay them a living wage for doing the things that they want to do. Personally, I find that even an MBA or a business degree doesn't prepare people for what the market's about. Now, they're fun because they have so many good ideas and they're so creative, and it's really interesting listening to them. You learn so much. But it really is a lot of work to deal with them, and it may be too much for what an average library has to offer. They really need up-to-date information, and I find that some of the formal programs to help businesses, between you and me, are a little antiquated. They're for manufacturing businesses with a model that goes back to the 1940s and 50s, not for the newfangled kind of service businesses where people are setting up internet businesses fairly quickly. First of all, they are going to trust other people who are in business, other people who have their own companies and own consulting firms, more than they're going to trust and respect the people who work in the library. So this is where you really have to partner with other entrepreneurs, talk to people at the Chamber of Commerce, and find folks who are self-employed or small business owners who are willing to come in and be their mentors. And yes, they need to know about money and sales and strategic planning and the customers that they need to look at as much as anything else. This, again, by the way, is where they need to look at local statistics and local facts more than they need to look at what's happening nationally. The rule is you look at national statistics to get ideas, and then you do the research at the local level. So there's a lot of kinds of resources that we need, and thank you very much.
And thank you, Pat. We have quite a collection of resources related to library staff meeting the needs of job seekers on WebJunction, and I encourage everyone to visit the Workforce Resources section. If you want to find out more about Project Compass, there's a section that addresses that particular project. I also want to mention in particular in relation to serving the entrepreneur, we had an excellent webinar series called Libraries and Economic Development, which will give you a great body of information if you're just getting started in understanding how to serve the entrepreneurs in your community. And I want to also remind everyone that this was funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and we are very pleased to be able to deliver this series for you.